The Sclc stood for the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and it was ran by Martin Luther King Jr. in the 1960s. It was founded following the Montgomery bus boycott involving Rosa Parks. Martin Luther King invited over 50 black ministers to its first meeting. The Sclc was an organization who was in favor of civil rights and equality, and they protested in many campaigns and events in the 1960s. One of the events was Citizenship Schools, which originally started in 1954 in South Carolina and Georgia. These schools focused on teaching adults to read so that they can do things like pass their voter registration literacy tests. The state of Tennessee revoked against the Citizenship Schools, so the Sclc rescued them. Now they not only taught reading, but secretly they taught democracy and civil rights, community leadership and organization, politics, and strategies and tactics of resistance and struggle. Another campaign was the Albany Movement. The Albany Movement was a board protest against segregation that took place in Georgia. In 1961 and 1962, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference joined it. It was the organization's first major nonviolent campaign. Although they accomplished a few things, it was thought to be not successful because they didn't win any changes in civil rights. This movement also got very little national attention. The Birmingham campaign was another movement, but unlike the Albany movement, it wanted to focus on desegregation just for the downtown merchants, unlike the whole city of Albany. Unlike Albany, Birmingham was a success. As president of the Sclc, Martin Luther King Jr. had been asked to participate in the campaign. On May 2nd, more than 1,000 African American school children joined the demonstrations. Many were arrested. The next day, 2,500 more students joined, and they, along with the other protesters, were attacked by police dogs and knocked down by fire hoses. The March on Washington was a big step in the civil rights movement. Following the Birmingham campaign, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference called for massive protests in Washington, D.C. to push for the new civil rights legislation that would outlaw segregation across the whole nation. The March on Washington was a huge success for the civil rights movement. This included no violence. The March on Washington is also known for the famous I Have a Dream speech from Martin Luther King. The Southern Christian Leadership Conference sent people to help organize and lead demonstrations and give support to the St. Augustine movement in the North. So many protesters were arrested that the jails were filled and they couldn't fit any more people in them. The Southern Christian Leadership Conference was called to help the problems when voter registration and civil rights activity was blocked by illegal injunction. On March 7th, close to 600 protesters attempted to march from Selma to Montgomery. They were attacked by the police, who used tear gas and whips to drive them away. Later, a federal judge allowed them to march to Montgomery, and it ended up enacting the Voting Rights Act of 1965. The Chicago Freedom Movement, which was led by Martin Luther King, demanded open housing, quality education, transportation, and job access for African Americans. Led by Martin Luther King and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, The Poor People's Campaign demanded economic and human rights for poor Americans of diverse backgrounds.